Arrangement is one of the most difficult things for producers to get right. A lot of producers struggle with making their songs feel complete without feeling too long or repetitive, and frankly, sometimes boring. In this video, I'm going to show you my technique that's got me signed to some of the biggest labels in my genre. By the end of the video, you will understand this method and you'll be able to apply it to your own music. Let's get started with the video. The technique that I use to arrange my tracks is what I call the 3-pass method. This means that I'm going over the track 3 different times to arrange it. First pass is going to just be the main arrangement. This is where I want to focus on just from beginning to end, getting that track to be the appropriate length and putting in things like breaks, breakdowns, drops, or buildups based on common themes for other tracks within the style or genre. In other words, I want to use reference tracks or my own experience to go in and start to arrange the track very loosely based on common arrangements that are usually within the style or genre of the track that I'm writing. Of course, I don't have to exactly adhere to another track, but this just gives me a good starting point and it really helps people get out of that stuck in the loop mindset. I'm going to use the reference track of one of my own remixes. Let's go ahead and check this out. In this template, I have a bunch of usual music terms. They might be a little bit different in terms of dance music. They're a good outline for helping arrange your tracks. First, I'll explain the terms and then we'll go into an example of using each of these terms using my track. Intro, usually 30 seconds to a minute, is a great way to build some drums and make your song sound catchy and interesting without giving away too many elements at the beginning, like melodies or vocals or hooks. You want to save that for later in the track. Break, which isn't really a breakdown. I feel like it's just a bit of energy being pulled from the track, maybe taking out the kick drum or the bass line, something to kind of transition between the intro and maybe the main ideas of the track. This usually happens at about a minute or a minute and a half. Of course, every track is different, so take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt. All this is interchangeable, but I do find that the terms are helpful to know. Then you have your drop, which is either a drop or can be called a chorus or a verse. Basically, it means that you are having the main ideas of the track, the main elements of the track are usually in this section, or it's a section where you're playing the track out and bringing in more and more elements. These can range in length anywhere from 16 beats to 128 beats or longer. The cooldown is a good way to kind of transition into a lower energy part. So something like the drop or chorus can be a higher energy, and then the cooldown is a way to kind of transition into a lower energy by removing some of the elements, similar to how a break or a breakdown would work. And a breakdown is usually pulling away a lot of elements to allow for maybe a more melodic section of the track to be played. So you're usually removing drums, bass, kick, etc. Then we have our build-up, which is going to be either reintroducing those elements or just using the elements in the breakdown to create tension before we go into our drop. And something to note here is that in a lot of electronic dance music tracks, we have something called an alternative drop or an alternative chorus, which basically means that we're taking the first chorus and we're changing it for the second or even third chorus or drop. This is to keep the listener kind of at the edge of their seat, making it even more interesting by increasing the energy or just changing the overall vibe of the second or third drop so that it is different and it makes it more interesting altogether. Then we have another cooldown, another break, and then the outro and mix out. The outro is very important as well because if you are trying to get DJs to play your music, your intro and outro have to line up properly with the arrangement, usually in 32 beat or 64 or 128 beat sections. If your bars are not lined up properly, it makes it confusing for a DJ to play. So you want to make sure that you are following a proper structure, your intro and your outro. And if you're confused about bars and measures, basically in 4/4 time, which is what we're working with in almost all dance music, every 4 beats is 1 bar. So 4 bars is 16 beats, etc. And you usually want to be working with 4 bar structures. So we're not going to be focusing on the main automation. We're not going to be focusing on effects or any ear candy or anything really that special. This is just to get the general arrangement of the track. So I've laid out this arrangement already by using these MIDI clips. It's a very visual way of showing how the arrangement actually is in the track, but I'm going to actually show you how to do this by starting over and doing this in a new MIDI track. I want to make sure to warp the reference track to the BPM of my arrangement, otherwise it's not going to line up properly. Make sure to do that first, and then I'm going to start laying out where things start to change in the track and kind of explain as I go. At the beginning of the track, we have the intro. Usually goes between 30 seconds to a minute, so I can just jump up to the minute mark here. Perfect. So right here at bar 33, or at about 1 minute and 3 seconds, I hear that there's a transition into a break. Then I can actually just go like this and draw out a MIDI clip, and I can name this intro. I can make this yellow because I like that my drums are usually yellow. Okay, so the intro, then here I have this break. So I can see how long the break is by starting here. Maybe fast forwarding a bit. Usually breaks go for 32 beats, maybe 64 beats. Okay, so this one goes for 16 bars, which is 64 beats. So I can insert a MIDI clip and I can name this break. So break is when we're pulling some of the instruments away, removing some of the energy to kind of introduce new elements, maybe increase tension with a little bit of a buildup. And then here we have what we can call the drop, or we can call it the verse, or we can call it the chorus. It really depends on how you like to call it. We can make that a different color. And then I can just look to see how long the chorus goes for. So I'll pull the chorus up until here because I know that's where the chorus actually stops. And then I can listen again here. See what happens next. Okay, so now we're going back into what I call a cool down. So it's very similar to a break or a breakdown, but it's basically just a stepping stone into a breakdown. It's a way to remove the energy without removing too many elements or not really fully going into a breakdown. Select this here, insert a MIDI clip again, and we'll call this the cool down. Here we go into a full breakdown. I can tell it's a breakdown because it's pulling away more elements. There's no drums in it. It just feels more of like a melodic area of the track where you can really introduce some new melodies or new ideas. So again, just basing it off of here, I can see that this kind of lines up here. This is probably where the drop is. So I can just select here and take a listen. We're building up here. Obviously a build up is building up the tension, increasing the tension so that we can release on the drop typically. So I'll make this hopefully a red. And then of course, here we have the drop. Yep. Of course, the drop goes here. We can draw that out. And this is going to be actually an alternative drop. Tons of different things that we can do, but adding this second or alternative drop is a great way to continue making the track feel fresh and new and exciting. This goes on for quite some time up until about here. And I could even just grab this one here. And there is a little break here. Little breaks like this I won't focus on in this arrangement. I'll focus on in the next arrangement. Okay, so now a cool down here. Or a break. And then the outro. I can even zoom out here and throw this here. Again, listening. We can say outro. And what's really important about the outro is that we're removing elements slowly. And I would suggest in the last 64 or 32 beats at least, you want to have just totally a mix out, meaning that you want to make this really easy for the DJ to mix out of. So you don't want to have melodies, you don't want to have things that are going to be hard for the DJ to actually mix between tracks. This should probably be just drums here. And there we go. So now we have this basic outline from beginning to end, nothing special, just laying down based off this reference track, what the song can sound like. And then you want to go in and actually apply this to your track. So of course, this is just how this track was spelled out. But now you want to go back down to your track and say, okay, where can I put my break? Where can I put my drop, my cool downs? Things like that. You can use these as interchangeable building blocks to start to arrange your track. So now that I have that outline, let's actually look at doing an example of this very quickly. Now that I have all this laid out, I've used a reference track or I've built an idea of what I want the song to kind of sound like in my head. I can grab everything I have in the track and just duplicate it over through the entirety of the track. Grab everything and just duplicate it until it's as long as the reference. Now it's as long as the reference track. I can go in and make changes based on what I know about these different sections of the track. The intro, I want it stripped back a little bit, not totally full of elements. So I can go in and take maybe my bass elements out. And maybe I don't want to bring my clap in for the first minute of the track as well. I don't really need these pads. I probably won't need the lead sounds till much later in the track. So I'll get rid of a few more. And I can get rid of these pads some more as well. Okay, so now the intro to the break. Maybe the break, I can bring in the bass line. So I'll have that bass line there, but maybe the other elements of the bass line don't come in right away either. So I'll get rid of those until the drop, where the main ideas of the track start to come in. I can continue to do this based on the track. So the cool down, maybe I take the bass out of the cool down. Of course, I'm just grabbing random things here. I would definitely suggest spending more time on it than I am right now, but you get the idea. Go ahead, take that out of the cooldown. So let's go to the breakdown. Maybe we have the bass out of the breakdown as well, but then we'll take the other elements out of the breakdown. Maybe we'll take the drums out of the breakdown. I'll leave the pads though, because I want to probably have a melodic element in my breakdown. How many times will I say the word breakdown? Build up, let's say we don't want bass in the build up again. I'll leave these in. Drums are good for build up sometimes because they kind of build anticipation and build up energy. The alternative drop, so the drop that's a bit different than the first one. So this drop is going to have something a little bit different. So let's go in here and see what we have. These ride cymbals. So these rides are there to add energy. I don't need them in this major part of the track. Let's just use this for the alternative drop to make it more interesting. Here I have the cooldown. So the cooldown is where we want to remove some energy. So let's actually go back into this bar here and get rid of those rides until the end of the track. I want to remove something, cool down the track a little bit, take down the power and the energy. Then there's the breakdown at 177. So maybe we take out another element like the lead at 177. And at 193 is the outro. So I want to focus on mostly just drums here. Let's just get rid of the pads. And maybe we get rid of the bass in the last minute of the track or so. For the breaks, I want to add a little bit of automation to kind of break up the track. So I'm going to take out the low end of the kick. Just something very easy to do and quick to remind myself that that is the break. I'll put 200 hertz here, and I'll go the length of the break. 200 hertz there. And there we go. That's our first pass, very quickly done. I suggest spending more time on this, but basically all I did was take a reference track, outline the areas of where that reference track used some of these terms like intro, outro, drops. All right, moving on. The second pass is going to be a sub arrangement. And this is where we're spending most of the time actually arranging the track. So now we have the track kind of laid out from beginning to end, but this is where we're going to focus on all of the most important things. Where do our certain elements come in, like our drums, our claps, hats, snares, all those things? And then where do the lead instruments come in or the pads come in? We have to place them appropriately. So it makes sense for our individual tracks. We can use a reference track to get an idea of where other people might put it, but of course, ultimately, it falls on you where you think that you want to bring in the elements for your track. If you're learning anything from this, now would be a great time to subscribe to the channel so you can get more content like this. I do have a template that does go over some of this. So I have the main arrangement here, and then I have the sub arrangement. And the sub arrangement is basically where you can go in and make a second arrangement for your track to keep it more interesting. The main arrangement has the basic outline, and then this sub arrangement is where you can go in and say, you know, I want to have a new element here, and I want to have a small break here. And at this one, I want to have a start to something, like start the cutoff of the lead pluck to go up, or start the new synth, whatever it is that you're going to be putting in here. This is just a way that you can outline this, and you can actually use reference tracks to find where they are doing things like this. And the benefit of this is you can make it as detailed as possible. So I actually have a third row called details, which explains exactly what I think should be happening at this point. So if you want to download this template, there's a link to it in the description below. And it'll be very helpful because it actually describes each section kind of requires in order to stay interesting, or just some general suggestions that I have and I kind of put in my own tracks. So if we look here at the intro, it says slowly add elements to keep building the track and keep it interesting without giving away too many elements at first. That's what you want to do in the intro. Enough to keep it interesting, but not too much that you're giving away too much of the track. And if we go over a little bit further, we can see that we can use this area to keep the track interesting and keep building ideas. So they're just little notes that you can put in or take from this template, use it to your advantage when you're arranging your tracks, that you can kind of get an idea what you should put where. I'm going to go over some of the concepts and ideas that you can do in a sub arrangement. Instead of trying to do an example of building out the track, which would take a very long time, I'll show you what I did in one of my tracks and go over these concepts. This is a collaboration remix I'm doing with 40 Cats. So it's not 100% done, still working a little bit on the final touches, but this is a great place to focus on the sub arrangement. I'm going to show you these sub concepts, and these are things that you can consider while you're actually arranging your track. And if you're making your own template at the top of your track, you can write these in as well. First concept is mini breakdowns, or just mini breaks in the track. This is a great way to kind of either introduce a new element or just break up the track so it remains feeling interesting. So I can have right here, just the kick is coming in. The mini break is right here. And new elements coming here. Usually only a couple beats, maybe 4 or 8 or even 16 beats, but just a small break to kind of break up the track and keep it interesting. Transitions, places that you're going to transition from one part of the track to the next. Transitions usually follow on areas that are 16 or 32 beats apart or 4 or 8 bars apart. And they can be longer and they can be shorter, but that's generally how far apart they can be. And they can be as simple as adding a bit of white noise or adding a drum fill or adding in a new element, basically just transitioning from one part of the track to the next part of the track. For this example, I'm transitioning to the part where the shakers come in. So there's just a little snare hit before the kick comes back in and then an impact on the actual kick. This helps keep it interesting and fresh. And it's very easy to do. Automation. This is where I usually do 90% of my automation. I go through the track, I find where I want things to kind of come in using volume automation and cutoff automation and fine-tuning automation. All these things that I'm doing to build the track the way that I imagine the track being built, I do in this stage of the arrangement. Again, you can reference other tracks and see where they start to bring things in, but every track is different and just do what is best for your track. Breakdown and build-ups. I usually want to focus on these in the sub-arrangement of the track because they are usually different than the rest of the main ideas of the track. When I arrange my main arrangement, I'm taking the main parts of my track and kind of branching them out to fill the length of the track and put in the breaks and such. But the breakdowns and the build-ups are usually a bit different because we're bringing in different elements or melodic elements. But I usually wait till this point and I focus in on those and spend some time actually writing the breakdown and the build-up. Secondary builds, which are smaller buildups that are kind of a combination of mini breaks and transitions. These little buildups are great for keeping the track feeling very interesting because even though you're not really going into a full breakdown, you're kind of building up some tension and going into the next part of the track. It just kind of re-emphasizes the track and makes the listener feel that it's less repetitive. So here's an example of a mini break. Not a total breakdown, not a total build-up, but a little bit of a combination of two to just break up the track a little bit and keep it flowing and keep it as interesting as possible. Now we have different versions of the drop. So depending on the style and genre that you're using, you can actually have multiple variations of a drop. The first drop that I have is all the main ideas, and then the second drop or the alternative drop is the same as the first, but it's just more powerful. I have things opened up a little bit more. I have more effects playing. The drums feel a bit more aggressive because maybe I've added an open hat or something. Just a way to make the track feel like it's always kind of building forward and always becoming more interesting. Let's take a listen to both. The effects and atmospheres are things that you can just add in wherever you see fit. Basically, they're really good for transitions and for buildups and breakdowns and drops. You want to place them in a way that is encouraging the track to feel like it's not stagnant, it's not just repeating over and over the same thing. So again, listen to some references, find out where the artists put their effects and kind of jot them down and think about that when you're arranging your track. For atmospheres, with progressive house, the style that I make, there is a ton of atmospheric content in the track. So I like to have a lot of different one-shots and things that are creating the atmosphere. So I'm going to talk about the third pass of arrangement. And this is arguably the most important one, even though it's the least amount of work. For this part of the arrangement, you're going to take a step back. You're going to give yourself a few days at least of a break once you're completely happy with how the track sounds and you're happy with the arrangement. After you take a few days off from hearing that track or maybe working on other stuff, you want to come back to this track and you want to listen to it without looking at the project. The reason for this is if you're looking at the project, you kind of know what's happening next. You can see where you maybe leave things empty or you can kind of anticipate based on how the project looks, what the track is going to sound like. I want you to listen as if you're listening to it for the first time, and any time that you find that the track feels repetitive or boring, not as good as it could be, even just a little bit, make a note of exactly what time that is, because that's where you want to go in and change the arrangement and make adjustments to your track. You can also ask a friend to do this or a partner. I would encourage you to listen to this on different devices as well, like your cell phone or your car speakers. That track in a different area than what you're used to can actually make you appreciate the song in a different way and can show you where some of the weak points or the strong points might be that you might not have realized while you're actually creating the track. After you make those notes, you're going to go in, adjust and change your arrangement, give yourself another break of a few days, and do this process all over again. I do this for every single track, and sometimes I go months making changes, but I'm always improving the track every time I come back to it. If you do feel like the track is a little bit boring or repetitive in those situations, there's little things that you can do. They're very easy to make them more interesting. Things as simple as mini breakdowns, actual breakdowns, one-shot sounds, atmospheric sounds, an extra hook, or you can use automation to change the way that your sounds are actually working to keep them always moving and interesting. Of course, it's easier said than done, but sometimes going in and adding just a little bit can make a big difference. I guess now would be a great time to tell you that I do offer music production coaching, so you can go to my website and actually book one-on-one video calls with me where I can answer any questions you might have and where we can focus on your weak points of production to increase the overall quality of your music writing and your music production as quick as possible. Check the description for more information or click the card in the corner right now. And if you'd like to learn at your own pace, I also offer music production courses for both beginners and advanced producers. You can also check those out in the description below. Pro tip to remember is that when a person is listening and they get bored of the repetition, you want to be refreshing their ears. You want to be adding something new or something different to make that listener feel like that loop is kind of starting over again and maintaining their interest and keeping them to want to keep listening. So something as simple as a little break or an extra instrument or sound that you bring in, even for a short time, can really make or break a track. Now that we're done with that, why don't you check out one of these videos right here that YouTube actually recommends for you because it thinks that you'll benefit from it.